Hello everybody and welcome back to another ESO Guides video with me, Sherman. Today we're going to be talking about another class, the Dragon Knight. And the Dragon Knight is a very powerful class when built correctly. They can be one of the top fire damage dealers and the top poison damage dealers because of the benefits that they get from their class. So let's go ahead and talk about their passives and their active abilities. We're going to start, of course, with the Ardent Flame Tree. Now the Ardent Flame Tree is a very powerful fire tree. So remember, when you build a character, you do want to unlock all your passives because of the benefits that they offer you. Even if it's a minor benefit, it's still beneficial to you and your group, or it's going to be more beneficial to you. So starting at the top of the tree, we got the banner, the standard, but it's called the Dragon Knight Standard, and this ability is one of your ultimates, and it calls down a flaming battle standard that deals flame damage for each second that it's out, and it also applies major defile to your enemies. So it helps in those battles when you're fighting enemies that have, you know, that healing receive stuff, or healing the healing and the heals and stuff. It's really important to understand how this works, because it will save your life in a lot of encounters. Now it does cost 250, but you can get it at a reduced cost with Shifting Standard. Now Shifting Standard doesn't just reduce the cost, but the standard also is able to be moved to a new location, refreshing its duration. So you can pick it up and move it to a new location if you want to, and it makes it super beneficial for your group because you can move it around a battlefield. And when you're in Dire Frost Keep, this one is very, very important to use. Now the other one that you get is Standard of Might. Now this is a better one for most tanks because it not only does it give you that, but it, you know, the healing effect thing, or reduces their healing effect, but it also gives you a increases your damage while you're in that circle by 20%, and on top of that it also reduces the damage you take by 20%. Now a lot of tanks like to use this one, and I don't blame them. It still costs 250 ultimate, which you can build between battles. So when you're fighting trash and stuff, that's when you're going to build your ultimate for that encounter with that boss. And you're going to save these ultimates for the boss because of the effects that they offer, like the major defile, and the fact that they increase your damage and reduce the damage you take. So as a tank, it's really important to know that that's there. Now it's not one that it's all based on your choice, but you do have the two options. You also get Fiery Grip. Now this is a cool ability because it allows you to pull enemies to you, and it gives you a major expedition when you use it, and it does a little bit of flame damage. Now you're going to notice a lot of their abilities is flame damage based or poison damage based. And the reason why is because they get increased potential with fire and poison damage. So they get that with the basic, and then they get two morphs, of course. Their first one being Empowering Chains. Now Empowering Chains pulls the enemy instead, and you gain Empower, increasing the damage of your next attack. So it still pulls the enemy, but if it can't pull them, no, it still pulls them, yeah, and it gives you Empower. So that's the one. Now this one, if pulls you to the enemy, sorry, it brings you to the enemy. So it's a gap closer, and it gives you that Empower. This is one that I would suggest a tank using because it gives you a greater chance to get to the target faster. And you're using one of your own abilities. You're not having to use a weapon ability to do it, and it's going to cost you Magica. And if you're playing a Magica tank, this one's a lot better for you, because in your next damage that you do, especially if you set down your wall of fire or something, you're going to get that 20% extra damage for it. And if you're built properly, as a tank, you're going to be wearing either light armor or heavy armor, and you're going to try and get as much critical as you can, so that way that damage does even more. Now as DPS, this is another good one for you because you can move around the battlefield pretty quick as a Magica DPS. So there's that. Now this one, in Unrelenting Grip, if the target cannot be pulled, you are refunded for the Magica. Now it will only work on bosses, because a lot of enemies can be pulled. So you still get that on the bosses. Now if you're fighting an Antarok, like a Storm Antarok, an Ice Antarok, or Fire Antarok, those ones are harder to pull with this ability, so just remember that. But you get that option again, like I said. This one is better for if you're tanking, I think, and this one's better if you're not tanking. Some people will say this is better for tanks, but I don't think so. I think this one with the Empower is better for tanks and DPS. This one is better for like a Magica-based person who wants to pull an enemy to them so they can do their pulse with their staff, and the fact that if they don't pull them, it doesn't cost them any Magica. Next is Searing Strike. Now this one's I like. because it slashes the enemy with fire damage and additional fire damage over time. So it does more. It does damage over time with it. Now this one does have two morphs. It has a stamina morph and it has a Magica morph. Now the stamina morph allows it to turn into a poison damage ability, making you a really good poison tank or poison DPS. So either way, you get this extra poison damage on the enemy, and the damage increases by 9% every 2 seconds, and it lasts for 8.5 seconds. So you get that increased damage over time. Now this amount of time can also be increased with a passive, and we'll get to that when we get down there. Burning Embers is another really good one for a fire tank, because it also heals you for 75% of the damage you inflict when the effect ends. So that means when you hit them with this, you get that heal also. And it works for Magica DPS and Magica tanking. So you have those two effects there that you can get either way. If you're playing a stamina-based character, it's better to go with Venomous Claw. If you're playing a magic-based character, go with Burning Embers. Next, you get Fiery Breath. This is a really cool one because it does a 90 degree cone in front of you. So you get this cone effect of not 90 degrees. It's like 45 degree arc in front of you. So you get a 45 degree arc cone in front of you that shoots out, burning the enemies and applying a burn over time. So you get that. Well, you also can morph it into a stamina one, which is a poison one. And it does poison damage with increased poison damage, and it also applies Major Fracture. Now, if you're playing a stamina tank, this is going to be super beneficial for you, or if you're playing stamina DPS, because you can apply Major Fracture to multiple enemies in front of you. So, and it lasts for 8 seconds. Now, I know it doesn't seem like a long time, but that time can be increased with another passive, like I said, so it will last longer, and it gives you greater damage potential against your enemies because of it. Now, Engulfing Flames, affected enemies take additional damage from all flame attacks. That is amazing, especially if you're playing like a fire tank and stuff, because then you can do more fire damage on top of what you already do. So if you cast this on them, they're going to be burning for 8 seconds. Any fire damage you do on top of it is going to be increased even more. So if you do this, then Wall of Fire with a Fire Staff, you're going to do increased damage with that Fire Staff Wall of Fire, and that means you're going to get 2 ticks on them doing greater damage. So, and they also get extra fire damage from something else, and we'll get to that too. Lava Whip is a really good ability because it can, if you strike an enemy that is immobilized or stunned, you also set them off balance, which allows you to do greater damage. Because remember, in the champion tree, there's a thing that when you send an enemy off balance, you get 10% more damage added to them. So that's another thing to understand, is that effect. Now you do have 2 morphs. They're both Magica based. While the ability is slotted, you deal more damage with Ardent Flame abilities. So that means your weapon damage is increased by 70 for Ardent Flame abilities. This is a really good one to use if you're playing like a Magica, like a hybrid character, or even if you're playing a tank, because then your weapon damage is increased by 70 for Ardent Flame abilities. For every Ardent Flame ability used. So that includes Noxious Breath and Venomous Claw. So you can use that to hit them with this ability, and then you get that extra weapon damage. So it's a way for a tank to get some extra weapon damage. It's also a way for DPS to get extra weapon damage. Now, the next one here is Flaming Lash. Now, Flaming Lash, target off-balance enemies. It grants you a more powerful lash attack, dealing increased damage. Now, remember, if they're set off balance, which they will be, from it, then you can use it a second time, and your character does like this spinning whip attack and just will knock the snot out of them. With a staff, it looks really cool. With a sword and board, it looks really cool. With a two-handed, it looks amazing. Sorry, it does. And it does make you do greater damage. Because remember, if you hit them with this first, and then this, you're going to do greater damage. And on top of that, it'll heal you. It increases the damage, and it heals you for X amount over 2 seconds. So you get some extra heals in there as well. Next is Inferno. Now, Inferno is a really good one if you want to increase your spell critical. Because when you activate it, activate an Aura of Flame, launching a fireball at the nearest enemy for 5 seconds, dealing X flame damage. So you fire multiple fireballs at your enemy. But while it's slotted, you gain major proficiency, increasing your spell critical chance. Now, the great thing about this ability is its morphs. Also grants major savagery, while slotted, increasing your weapon critical strikes rating and fireball damage will scale with the highest statistic. So it will scale based on weapon or spell critical. So you get both major proficiency and major savagery. So you get both of them while it's slotted. So if you have this on your bar and you're playing like like I said, the DK makes a really good hybrid for one. So if you hybridize your DK, you can make a really powerful tank, a really powerful DPS, because you get both fire and poison damage at the same time. So you get those two things going at the same time. So remember, both trees have, you have a elemental expert, and then you have the mighty. And mighty gives you increased poison damage, while elemental expert gives you increased flame damage. Now you can do something in there where you get 15% from both. You only want 15% because being a DK, you get extra fire damage and you get extra physical damage as well from another thing. So we'll get to that. Now this one is a really cool one because this is really good for a healer. Because when you use it, instead of doing damage, it heals. So fireballs heals allies instead of damaging enemies. So that means you get that heal instead. So it makes you a really good healer, or gives you a really good heal ability on top of it, while giving you that increased spell critical. So you get that heal that is going to be increased because of the fact that your spell critical is so much higher that you're going to get critical healing with it. On top of that, here's the passives. Combustion increases damage of burning and poison status effects by 66%. That means when that is applied to them, they're going to take 66% more damage from burning and poison status effects. So just remember that. Next is warmth. Damaging enemies with ardent flame abilities also reduces their movement speed by 30% for 4 seconds. So when you use like noxious breath or engulfing flames, you're going to reduce their movement speed also. So you get that extra, you get that good damage, plus you get that extra other stuff. So those are the benefits that you get right there, some good benefits. Next is Searing Heart, or Searing Heat, which gives you increased damage of Fiery Breath, Searing Strike, and Dragon Knight Standard by 3%, and the duration by 2 seconds. So that means those abilities, the effects are going to last 2 seconds longer, and be increased by 3% of the damage. Now remember, if you're a Dark Elf, you get both Magica and Stamina. You get 9% Magica, 6% Stamina, and you get fire damage increase. So they make really good hybrid DKs, really powerful hybrid DKs, because they can put into both Stamina and Magica. And they get more Magica, so that means they can build out more Magica and still build out their Stamina to give them a 30,000 Stamina and a 30,000 Magica while being a tank even, with that greater health pool. It's just, it's kind of complicated to get there, I'm not going to lie, but it is possible. On top of that, you get World of Ruin, increases the damage of your flame, poison, area of effect abilities by 6%. Now, this makes you super powerful with damage, because you increase your flame damage and your poison damage, area of effect abilities by 6%. So that means any of these abilities, pretty much, that do area of effect, like your engulfing flames, your noxious breath, your inferno, is going to be increased in damage by 6%. Now remember, if you're a dark elf, you get 7% extra fire damage. So you get all that, plus you get this 7% up here from the engulfing flames. That's 14% plus another 6% makes it 20% extra fire damage added to the 20% you're going to get from your champion points. So you get an immense amount of fire damage. Now think about a high elf playing a DK as well. They get 4% fire damage. So they get that offset too, to where they can make out a little bit of different damage, giving them greater damage potential as well as a DK flame tank or as a DK flame DPS. So you have those abilities to do that. Now we're going to move on to Draconic Powers, which is more of the defensive line. And even though their ultimate is Dragon Leap, which I'm going to explain real quick, launch yourself at an enemy, dealing so much physical damage to all enemies in the area and knocking them back. Well, that's beneficial because when you knock them back, it gives it doesn't allow them to do as much damage because now they're further away and they got to get back to you. So it reduces the amount of damage coming in. Now you get Take Flight. Launches yourself at an enemy dealing so much, but can jump further and costs less and deals more damage. So that's a benefit from Take Flight. Now Furious Leap is the one I like because gain a damage shield after leaping. So you get a damage shield which is based off your max health for 6 seconds, and it absorbs 100% of your max health damage. So if you have a 32,000 max health, it's 32,000 damage shield. So you get this huge massive damage shield when you do it. I like to use that as a tank, personally. Now this is Spiked Armor. Spiked Armor is your way of getting Major Resolve and Major Ward. If you guys remember, I told you each class gets this somehow. Now, this is great for tanking, DPS, and for healing, whatever. This is your benefit to get those greater resistances to reduce the damage that you take initially, and then your damage reduction kicks in again, like I said. So, you got 2 morphs. You got Hardened Armor, which gives you a damage shield for a brief period, and it's based off of 10% of your max health. Now, remember that 10% can be increased through Bastion, and you can kick it up to 20% more or 15% more, whatever you want, making this shield actually more powerful based on your max health. So if you have a greater health pool, this is greater for tanks. Now the volatile armor is really good for DPS or damage dealers or healers. And I say it's really good for them because it does magic damage, and then it does magic damage while active armor. The armor returns X magic damage to melee attackers. So you get 2 ways of doing damage. Now this is also good for a tank, but I prefer the damage shield because I can fire this off once and then pop another damage shield and then keep that other damage shield going, and then once I need to recast this in 20 seconds, I can fire it off again and then get that extra little bit of damage shield in there. And it doesn't cost a lot of Magica. If you set your tank up right, you can get a 10% reduction or more and get this reduced. Now this one is also really good, like you said, for tanking and DPS. The reason I say for DPS is because it does damage outwards. And for a tank, it's also good to have that damage going outwards also. And then over 10 seconds. So it's a damage over time. And then while active, your armor returns so much damage, magic damage, to melee attackers. So if you're playing a Magica tank, this is better. If you're playing a stamina tank, this is better. But you can still go either way. It's up to you. On top of that, you get Dark Talons, which is basically locks down enemies and doesn't allow them to move for 4 seconds. Now, while enemies are held, an ally can activate Impale, the synergy, and deal more damage to them. Now, it's a really good ability, especially when you're in dungeons, but it costs a lot of Magica. So if you don't have a really high Magica decrease, it's really hard to get this to work with heavy armor and keep it effective with heavy armor unless you have a really high Magica pool. Now, if you're playing in light armor, this is going to be reduced a lot. Now, you got 2 more, so Burning Talons and Choking Talons. Burning Talons adds damage over time. So when you hit them with it, it does flame damage, and it does damage over time for 4 seconds. So you get this 2 things of flame damage going on, and then enemies that are held, you can activate the Impale again and do magic damage to them, or an ally can. So you get those 2 benefits. Now, this one is even better, because it also applies Minor Maim, which reduces the damage they do by 15% for 4 seconds. If you use this on a boss right before they do their heavy attack, you reduce their damage by 15%. And it does affect bosses, it just doesn't show normally them being clenched in the thing. It'll just trigger and it does affect them. They can be affected by Minor Maim with that. Dragon's Blood. Now this is kind of like your heal, but it's costly, really costly. So it's not really important. I would say it wouldn't be as well to use as, say, like there's other abilities that you can get that give you heals from other sources, and they're going to cost you less. Like Vigor would be better than using this. But the benefit to using this is you also gain Major Fortitude, increasing your health recovery by 20% for 20 seconds. Now it does give you 33% of your missing health, and there is a change coming in here soon, which is going to be based on missing Magica on one of the morphs. Next morph is Green Dragon's Blood. This does the heal over time. It also grants you major fortitude and major endurance, giving you both Magica or health and stamina recovery by 20%. Now remember, as the DPS, you're going to be focusing on a lot of light and heavy attacks, and so as the stamina tank. So you're going to be able to get more stamina back after you focus when you fire this off, because you're going to get 20% more health and stamina recovery. Now remember, heavy armor gives you 20% health recovery, and medium armor gives you 20% stamina recovery. So you're going to get 40% recovery in both health and stamina. This is why they make really good stamina tanks and really good stamina DPS, because of the poison damage and this as well. Next is this one, and this is the one that's getting changed to being 33% of your max Magica instead of max health. This is a mix-up on their part, and I do apologize. If I was part of the wiki, I'd fix it. You also gain major fortitude and major vitality. Now this is super beneficial if you're wearing light armor and tanking. Increases health recovery and healing received by 8%, because when you're wearing heavy armor, you get that healing received by 8%. Now if you're tanking in light armor, you're going to get that 8% healing received. So this is really good for Magica tanks in light or heavy armor. So you get that extra healing received, which makes it more beneficial to you, especially if you're using damage shields. You're playing an absorption tank instead of a sword and board tank, because that healing received does help you greatly, because it doesn't just affect this, it also affects the heal that you put on yourself. So you can use this twice. You fire it once to give you that 8% healing received for 20 seconds, fire it again, and it's going to increase that 36% up 8%. So you get more healing from it. So just remember that. Next is reflective scales. Flex your scales, reflecting up to 4 projectiles over 4 seconds. Now, DKs can make great absorption tanks because of this ability. They can have a damage shield up, they can activate this ability, which is going to redirect projectile damage back to the enemy for 4 seconds. It doesn't cost a lot if you're wearing light armor. If you're wearing heavy armor, you do have to get greater spell reduced costs, so just remember that. You also gain minor ward, increasing your spell resistance with 1. And with the other one, you get projectiles now reflected deal additional damage to the attacker. So you get that way of either taking something that's going to give you a little bit more spell resistance for 20 seconds, or something that's going to give you a way of doing damage back to your enemies. These are both great tanking abilities if you're playing more Magica based. Or if you're playing, like I said, a hybrid. You can actually focus into these things. Now you got Inhale. Now this is a weird ability. I'm not really fond of using it, but I do use it from time to time because of certain things. You channel draconic energy to suck in the air around you, dealing so much magic damage to nearby enemies, and healing you for 100% of the damage caused. It's really great for a tank or like a stamina DPS person to be able to get this and get some extra healing from it. And then after 2.5 seconds, you exhale fire, dealing Y fire damage to nearby enemies. So you suck in and then you breathe out, and it's a very powerful ability because of it. Now, one first hit interrupts enemies that are casting. So when you cast it the first time, you interrupt them. So this is really good for tanks. And then on top of that, you get that fire damage that went into for whatever. And when you interrupt them, you stun and set them off balance for 2 seconds. So not only do you interrupt them, but you stun them and set them off balance. Now remember, you're going to get benefits from your melee tree or your champion points that are going to give you greater damage to stunned and off balance enemies. So it's good to have this on your bar when you use it, because you're going to be able to do additional damage. Now, great for DPS and great for the others. Now, you're not going to do a lot of Magica damage or a lot of flame damage. Or you're going to do more flame damage, but you're not going to do a lot of Magica damage if you're playing more of a stamina-based character. So this is just something you can use. Next one is Draw Essence. Now, the second hit refunds Magica for each enemy hit. So when you do that flame damage, you get Magica back. This is better for like a Magica-based character, because you're going to suck in doing Magica damage, then you're going to breathe out fire damage, giving you both Magica and fire damage. On top of that, you're going to get Magica back when you do it. So it's kind of like you recover the cost. And depending on how many enemies you hit, you're going to get more Magica back. Now we're getting into the passives. Block an additional 10% damage. This is why they can get away with tanking with a shield or without a shield, because they get this extra block. They get more increased damage mitigation when they block. So they get greater effect when they're using a shield or not. So it's really, the trade-off is vice versa. They're good no matter what they do. And it works with staves as well. Now remember, Ice Staff is getting a change to where they're going to basically get the same ability as the Sword and Board when it comes to damage reduction when you block. Like how much more damage you can block. So you're going to get that 10% added to that stuff. While using Draconic abilities, increase healing received by 12% while a Draconic ability is active. Now remember, when you use this ability, you're going to get 8%. And it's going to be based off max Magica missing soon. So you're going to get 8% healing received from that. And then on top of that, you're going to get an extra 12%, making it a total of 20% healing received. Now, if you're in light armor, like I said, this is going to be more beneficial for you. This is going to be more beneficial for you if you're playing like a stamina tank, because you're going to still get 12% healing received. And you can put in the bash or into the quick recovery in your champion points to give you 8% if you need to, or you're going to be wearing heavy armor, which is going to give you 8% healing received. So either way, you're going to get this greater healing received. On top of that, you get Elder Dragon, which increases health recovery by 4% for each Draconic ability slotted. So the more Draconic abilities you have slotted, the more you're going to get health back, or more health recovery you're going to get. You also get Scaled Armor, which increases your spell resistance. Now they do get the greater spell resistance than a Templar, but they also become super tanky because of the way that they work. Now DKs do make some of the better tanks in the game. I will admit that. But you have to know what you're doing with the character. You need to know how to make a really good hybrid character to make them work for you. Next is the Earthen Heart tree. And in here you get Magma Armor as your ultimate. Now Magma Armor a lot of people don't like to use. I like to use it because it ignites molten lava, the molten lava in your veins, and limiting incoming damage by 3% of your max health. So it gives you a damage reduction. So 3% of your max health. Depending on how high your health pool is, you can get a pretty massive damage reduction from that. And then deal flame damage to nearby enemies each second for 9 seconds. Makes it really beneficial to have. Now there's two morphs. There's Magma Shell and Corrosive Armor. When activated, nearby allies gain a powerful damage shield. Now this one is really good because when activated, nearby allies gain a damage shield for 100% of their max health for 9 seconds. Now, having 18k thing, you're going to get that much in a damage shield. So you're basically going to get this maximum damage shield, give it to your group, reducing their damage even greater for 9 seconds. Now, that's pretty dang good, no offense. Next one is Corrosive Armor. This is great for a poison DPS, because now instead of doing fire damage, you're doing poison damage to nearby enemies each second for 9 seconds, and while active, your attacks ignore 100% of the enemy's physical resistance. That means you do not need physical resistance stuff like worrying about casting those abilities, because now you're going to get this dealing poison damage and ignoring their physical resistance. So you're going to be able to do twice as much damage with your weapons continuously for 9 seconds. So it's really a really great thing if you want to do some incredible damage. What you do is you cast this, do your poison breath, your noxious breath, giving you major fracture even though you don't need it, but you put that poison damage on them, then you hit them with the poison talons, then you go to flurry and just unload, and you're going to be able to do all 3 of those in 9 seconds, giving you the maximum damage potential they can do. And if you're a crit person, you're going to do even greater damage. So if you're playing a damage dealer, that's greater damage. If you're playing a tank, you're going to get greater damage from it. So just understanding how it works is beneficial. And it works really good with a stamina tank. Next is Stone Fist. Slam an enemy with solid rock, dealing X Magica damage and stunning them for 3 seconds. Not a great ability, but it can be. It can be even better. One, you get slam an enemy with a rock dealing. You get Obsidian Shard, which heals nearby allies. This is great for a healer. They can stand back and just cast this out and heal people. Now the next one is Stone Giant. Stone Giant is more of a tanky thing, and the reason I say that is because it reduces the cost. You also gain minor resolve, increasing your physical resistance. So this can make you more tanky, and has a reduced cost of 20%. So it costs less, and it gives you minor resolve, increasing your physical resistance. Now remember, if you're in light armor, you're not going to have a really high physical resistance. So this is a way to build your physical resistance, and it does last for 15 seconds. So that's pretty good, considering most of your buffs lasts for 20 seconds defensively. This one adds a 9-second or 15-second extra physical resistance. So it helps you with your tanking in light armor. Next, we get Molten Weapon. Now, this is like one of the coolest abilities that the Dragon Knight gets, because it casts major sorcery on your whole group. That increases their spell damage by 20%. Not only for you, but for everyone in your group. So even though they might have that ability, they're using like I use Rally. I'll still be using Rally for the heal, but I won't worry about getting the spell damage or the weapon damage, because you do get that with another morph. But I get increased spell damage too, which helps me with my healing. So this helps me and my group when I'm playing with a DK. It helps me get that extra spell damage. Now, Igneous Weapon is more of a tank, like melee tank person, or a hybrid tank, because now you got to see what it does. You and your allies gain major brutality, increasing your weapon damage on top of the major sorcery, giving you both 20% spell and weapon damage increase for 30 seconds. So now your fire damage and your poison damage is doing 20% more, or getting 20% more weapon damage added to them. Weapon and spell damage. So you get that more increase. So they make really good hybrid tanks, like I said. The next one here is Molten Armaments, and now this is really good for a DPS or a Magica tank. And the reason I say that is your own damage with fully charged heavy attacks is increased by 40%. Now remember, at playing a tank, you're going to be focusing a lot of heavy attacks. Playing DPS, you're going to be weaving heavy attacks into your rotation to get you your return of resources. This does 40% more damage on top of the 20% that you're going to get as a tank, or the 10% already. So no matter what, you're going to be getting extra damage in there. And that also adds on to spell damage. So with a staff, you're going to get 40, 60, 70% more damage. And if you're playing a tank or DPS, you're still going to get that 70% damage from that heavy attack no matter what. So that's a really beneficial thing to have as a DPS or a tank, as long as you're playing Magica. So this is really beneficial to keep on your bar. Obsidian Shield. Now this is a really great damage shield, but only if you're a Magica tank. If you're a DPS, a stamina tank, this isn't very good for you, because it's based off of max magic. If you're playing a full stamina tank, you're going to be running sword and board mostly then, because you're going to get all that other damage from poison and stuff, or you're going to run two-handed to get a damage shield, and then this one will make up the difference. But it's not as powerful without having a lot of Magica. Just saying. So you get two morphs. You get Igneous Shield, which is great for a healer, because it also grants you major mending whenever you cast it, and it puts a damage shield on you and your nearby allies. That's based on max Magica, and your own damage shield absorbs 100% additional damage. So this is really great for a healer. Now, not so much for a tank unless you're using Vigor, and then even then, it's a stamina-based ability, so it's kind of a waste, because it's a Magica ability that you're using just to get that extra healing. I would say it's better for a Magica-based healer or a Magica-based DPS person, so they get that extra healing done. Or even as a tank, you can use this, so you get that extra healing done for when you're using abilities that do heal you. Like, remember up here, the Stone Fist? You got one that heals you and one that doesn't. The one that heals you is going to heal you for greater, because you're using that damage shield. Now, for a tank, a Magica tank, I would suggest this one, or a Magica DPS. I would suggest this one, because when your own shield is removed or expires, it deals damage to all enemies around you. So it does, not only does it block the damage, but it also does damage back based on your max Magica. So when it expires, you just explode doing damage, and trust me, it gets pretty big. Now these shields do last for 6 seconds, which is great, and it's very beneficial to have these, because the greater the shield, the more powerful it gets. Now you can do this in both medium or heavy and light armor. Light armor, it's going to be more effective because of the fact that the reduced cost is going to be greater. Next is Purify. Now a lot of people don't use Purify, and I don't really understand why, because encase an enemy in stone, stunning them for 20 seconds and dealing X magic damage when the effect ends, Affected enemies can take damage before the stun is broken. So that means for 20 seconds you can do a lot of damage, and then when it breaks they get extra damage on top of that. Now you got two versions. You got Fossilize and you got Shattering Rocks. Now Fossilize roots the enemy after the stun ends. So that means they get stunned for the 20 seconds, and then on top of that, affected enemies take damage before the stun ends, but they also get rooted for 3 seconds where they can't move after the effect ends. So you get those two effects, and it's really cool when you're for like Magica tanking, because you can lock down an enemy and then focus on another enemy, kill it, and then turn back to that other enemy and kill it. So you get that choice. And it also reduces the damage that's being done to your group because one is turned to stone. Shattering Rocks, when the effect ends, nearby enemies take damage and have a chance to be set off balance. So this one is a really good one if you want to set enemies off balance. And it does it with a 50% chance to set enemies off balance. And it does damage in an AoE fashion. Remember, you got Fragment Shield and you got this on it, this together. You get those two things firing off, you're going to be doing a lot more damage with Area of Effect. But it's up to you, and it's your decision. Ash Cloud, summon a scorching cloud of ash at the target location, dealing X flame damage to nearby enemies, and also reducing their movement speed by 70%. This is great for tanking because that's your job. Your job is crowd control. So you put this on yourself, and for that amount of time that it lasts, you're going to be doing flame damage, and you're going to be reducing their movement speed by 70%. Now this one, Cinderstorm, the snare persists for longer after leaving the area. So if they leave the area, it will persist for 1.1 second if they leave the area. So if they leave, they get that extra 1.1 second of being slowed. Eruption is the one I like. Deals additional damage on cast. So you get a flame damage on cast, and then you get the flame damage over time, and then you get the movement speed reduction thing. This is amazingly powerful. So the next thing is their passive, starting with Eternal Mountain. Now Eternal Mountain, if you look, increases the duration of Earthen Heart abilities by 20%. So each of these, the duration gets increased by 20%. No matter what. So the damage shield on this is increased from 9 seconds up by 20%. So it's going to be about 12 or 15 seconds damage shield. Down here you get Battle Roar. Activating an ultimate restores health, Magica, and stamina. Amounts increased by 70% of ultimate's cost. Now remember, if you cast this at the right moment, you're going to get a damage shield based on your max health. And then when activated, nearby allies gain a damage shield for 100% of their max health, kind of thing. So you get those two shields off, but it gives you a way to save your people's life and heal you if there's a big damage ability that gets used. So just saying that it's really beneficial to know what the two things do. Mountain's Blessing, activating an Earthen Heart ability grants you major brutality or minor brutality to you and your nearby allies, increasing your weapon damage by 5%. Now remember, I told you DKs make awesome stamina DPS. The reason why is they get the igneous weapon, which gives them both major brutality and major sorcery, and on top of that, when they use that, they also apply minor brutality to themselves in their group, doing a total of 25% extra weapon damage. So they give out 25% extra weapon damage, which is really powerful. And if you are in combat, you also gain 3 ultimate, and this can occur every 6 seconds. Now the reason I'm pointing this out is because, remember, most of your damage shields are every 6 seconds. So if you're casting a damage shield every 6 seconds, you're not only getting that, but you're also getting that ultimate too. And it makes for a really quick ultimate gain, to where you don't need things like Heroic Strike or Carve from two-handed weapon that gives you extra ultimate. You can get ultimate really fast this way. Now, while using Earthen Heart abilities, activating Earthen Heart ability also restores 5% of your max stamina. So being a stamina tank, using these does help keep your stamina pool more active and stuff. If you're playing a tank and you're playing like the hybrid tank, like I told you about, where you have a really high Magica pool and a really high stamina pool, you can effectively keep both resources going. And if you're playing with a sword and board or a two-handed, put Magica on your weapon with Magica or Magica Absorb. That way you get Magica Return whenever you do a light or heavy attack or use an ability. You have a chance of getting extra Magica back. This way you don't need as much Magica recovery with it. So that is pretty much the DK in its own essence and how it works. Those are the abilities, the passives, and the active ones. It's got a lot of utility in there for a lot of different things, and it does make one of the more efficient tanks. But unfortunately, that does conclude the end of this video. If you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button. It's down here in this bottom right-hand corner. If you want to see more of my videos and want to subscribe to me, you can, and that's down in the bottom left-hand corner. But until next time, guys, I do hope you enjoyed this video. I hope I gave you a lot of information, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.